Jai Maharaj, Hare Krishna. I'll start kirtan unless you have an on-site combo at the ready.
I'm sorry, I needed to turn up the volume. Tell me again.
I'll start kirtan unless you have an on-site combo at the ready.
No, they're not quite at the ready.
Here we go.
Okay.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotar Satashri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Yamuna Mayi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, and welcome everyone for Srimad Bhagavatam with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. It is Friday, January 31st, 2025 in New York. And today we're picking up with Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 9th chapter, beginning today with text number 32. And just one quick note of housekeeping before we begin. This coming Wednesday, which is February the 5th in New York, I may or may not be able to host. So if there's someone who would like to do that, it's very easy. I can set up and show them how to do it. I'll put my email address in the chat window, and you can contact me if you'd like to do that either Wednesday or anytime. I'm certainly not intending to hog these duties. So my email is there. Anyone who would like to host Wednesday or anytime, please let me know. Thank you very much. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Matir Vidushita Devai Patadbhir Asahishnubihi. Yo Narada Vachastatyang Nagrahisham Asatamaha. This is Dhruva Maharaj thinking. Since all the demigods who are situated in the higher planetary system will have to come down again, they are all envious of my being elevated to Vaikuntha Loka by devotional service. These intolerant demigods have dissipated my intelligence, and only for this reason could I not accept the genuine benediction of the instructions of sage Narada. As shown by many instances in the Vedic literature, when a person undergoes severe austerities, the demigods become very much perturbed because they are always afraid of losing their posts as the predominating deities of the heavenly planets. It is known to them that their position in the higher planetary system is impermanent, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter, Kshine punye martyalokam vishanti. It is said in the Gita that, after exhausting the results of their pious activities, all the demigods, who are inhabitants of the higher planetary system, have to come back again to this earth. It is a fact that the demigods control the different activities of the limbs of our bodies. Factually, we are not free even in moving our eyelids. Everything is controlled by them. Dhruva Maharaj's conclusion is that these demigods, being envious of his superior position in devotional service, conspired against him to pollute his intelligence, and thus, although he was the disciple of a great Vaishnava, Narada Muni, he could not accept Narada's valid instructions. Now, Dhruva Maharaj regretted very much that he had neglected these instructions. Narada Muni had asked him, "Why should you bother about insult or adoration from your stepmother?" He, of course, said to Dhruva Maharaj that since Dhruva was only a child, what did he have to do with such insult or adoration? But Dhruva Maharaj was determined to achieve the benediction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore Narada advised him to go back home for the time being, and in mature time, he could try to practice devotional service. Dhruva Maharaj regretted that he had rejected the advice of Narada Muni and was adamant in asking him for something perishable, namely revenge against his stepmother for her insult and possession of the kingdom of his father. Dhruva Maharaj regretted very much that he could not take seriously the instruction of his spiritual master, and that his consciousness was therefore contaminated. Still, the Lord is so merciful that due to Dhruva's execution of devotional service, He offered Dhruva the ultimate Vaishnava goal. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here Dhruva Maharaj is regretful that he couldn't take the instruction of his spiritual master seriously. So this whole pastime is instructive for us in so many ways, one of which is that we should take the instructions of our spiritual master seriously. And if we don't, we should regret that. Another thing here is that he says, Prabhupada says, it's a fact that the demigods control the different activities of the limbs of our bodies. I've heard many times Ravinder Swarup Prabhu compare the network of demigods throughout the universe to the nervous system. They're like the nervous system of the universe, controlling everything that everyone else is doing. We're like the microorganisms in the body of the universe, just as there are so many microorganisms in our own bodies doing things and seemingly having full lives. Unbeknownst to us, it's different for the demigods. They actually know what's going on. So here in this verse, Dhruva is lamenting that he's blaming the demigods for contaminating his intelligence. What is the Sanskrit here? Vidushita, contaminated. They messed me up. They messed with my head. I wanted to take my spiritual master's instructions seriously, but because they knew that their time was coming to an end, they saw my advancement in devotional service, became envious, and decided to give me a hard time. At least this is what he's thinking. Maharaj, would you care to say anything on this verse?
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Vimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavaya Pracharani Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pajitani. Well, neither Srila Prabhupada nor Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on it, but I can't help but notice that through what we call shifting the blame, that Dhruva Maharaj is pinning it on the demigods. It's their fault. They vidushita evai mati. They contaminated my consciousness. So I don't know what to say about that, except that it does jump out at us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. Oh, we have a hand up. Saraswati Mata, please go ahead.
Pranams, Param Pujya Maharaj, and all the Vaishnavas. Yes, Dhruv Maharaj is blaming the demigods, and we know that they are sort of supervisors to some degree, but I mean, the onus, I don't know, that sort of seems like you're shrugging responsibility and accountability when the onus really should be on your own actions. Yes, granted, the demigods do try and mess up, these rishis' meditation, like Vishwamitra comes to mind. But at the end of the day, I'm wondering whether we really should be shrugging this sort of responsibility and placing the blame wholly and solely on the demigods. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, that was essentially my point. And I don't have a comment on it, except that there it is.
Any comments or additions, questions from you have an assembly about you there, Maharaj?
No.
In the case of this purport, Prabhupada fairly well covers Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti's comments quite well. His comments are quite short. Prabhupada's are much longer. So yeah. Saraswati Mata, if you'd like to read our text 33, please go ahead.
Yes, text 33. Devim mayam upasritya prashupta iva bindrik tapya dviteya pi asati pratravya hrid ruja. Translation. Dhruva Maharaja lamented, I was under the influence of the illusory energy, being ignorant of the actual facts. I was sleeping on her lap. Under a vision of duality, I saw my brother as my enemy, and falsely I lamented within my heart, thinking they are my enemies. Purport. Real knowledge is revealed to a devotee only when he comes to the right conclusion about life by the grace of the Lord. Our creation of friends and enemies within this material world is something like dreaming at night. In dreams, we create so many things out of various impressions in the subconscious mind, but all such creations are simply temporary and unreal. In the same way, although apparently we are awake in material life, because we have no information of the soul and the supersoul, we create many friends and enemies simply out of imagination. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that within this material world, or material consciousness, good and bad are the same. The distinction between good and bad is simply a mental concoction. The actual fact is that all living entities are sons of God or byproducts of his marginal energy. Because of our being contaminated by the modes of material nature, we distinguish one spiritual spark from another. That is also another kind of dreaming. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that those who are actually learned do not make distinctions between a learned scholar, a brahmana, an elephant, a dog, and a chandala. They do not see in terms of the external body. Rather, they see the person as spirit soul. By higher understanding, one can know that the material body is nothing but a combination of 5 material elements. In that sense, also, the bodily construction of a human being and that of a demigod are one and the same. From the spiritual point of view, we are all spiritual sparks, parts and parcels of the Supreme Spirit God. Either materially or spiritually, we are basically one. But we make friends and enemies as dictated by the illusory energy. Dhruva Maharaj therefore said, Devim mayam upsratya. The cause of his bewilderment was his association with the illusory material energy. Om Gyanantimirindasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Ve Namaha. Well, the opening statement applies to all conditional souls under the control of the external energy, specifically under the influence of the 3 gunas. And it stated how one is sleeping on the lap of Maya. So the Prakritim Kriyamanini Guna Karmana Sarvasya Ahankar Vimudhatma Karta Ahamiti Manyate. The bewildered soul, under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature, considers himself the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by the illusory energy. So under the spell of Maya, Dhruva's original consciousness was covered, and he related to others in the world in terms of this duality: friend, foe, good, bad, pious, impious, because this is the business of the material mind, to accept and reject, dvesh and raga. A purified soul, however, sees everyone and everything in relation to Krishna, so he has the correct vision, and he deals with everyone on that basis. Pandita Samdarshina. He sees the spiritual spark, the part which is part and parcel of Krishna. Mamevansha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasanstandindriyani prakruti stani karshati. The living entity, the Lord said, in this material world are my eternal fragmental parts. But due to the material conditioning, they are struggling very hard with the senses, which includes the mind. Now that Dhruva Maharaja has become completely purified and is on the transcendental platform, he can clearly see the difference in himself as the Dhruv before he engaged in bhakti, and now the fully purified Dhruv. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he has stated clearly that anything on the material platform, things like good and bad and pious and impious things, they're all equally bad when it's looked under the pure, clear lens of Krishna consciousness, because it really has no bearing to our eternal constitutional position as Nitya Krishna Das. I'm just reminded of my mother. She always used to warn us, be very careful of what you wish for, because it can backfire on you, especially when it's not connected with serving Krishna. It definitely will backfire on you. So, like many of us, Dhruv is sort of wishing that he can turn the clock back and have this do-over. But of course it's not possible. But yeah, there's been times when I definitely have wanted to get a second chance, a second shot, do a do-over, and hopefully make the correct choices. Nevertheless, despite Dhruv's misgivings and regrets about past materially consciousness-driven choices, the fact is his resolve now to always be engaged in Krishna's service will definitely give him everlasting bliss. Therefore, he will live forever at the lotus feet of Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, from some comments from you here.
The diving Mayama posture. I took shelter in the wrong place. I took shelter of the illusory energy, and therefore prasuptiva. It's as though I were dreaming. The whole material world, Prabhupada pointed that out. There's like night dreaming and daydreaming. At night we dream, and then we get up, and then we keep dreaming. That's going on. And Bindadrik. Prahlad Maharaj comments on this, how because of the uncontrolled mind, we see friends and enemies by the influence of the material energy. Therefore, he was seeing his brother as an enemy. Everyone's categorized friend, enemy, and it's also changes. So the country that was our friend is now our enemy. The country that was our enemy is now our friend. The person who is our friend is now our enemy, and so on. So this goes on by the influence of Maya. And so Dhruva Maharaj essentially says, I was in Maya, and that's why I was seen in this way. Yeah, all right. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Is there someone there with you who would like to read a verse or two? Our next purport is very short, so the next reader can do 34 and 35 if they like.
मया प्रार्थितं व्यर्थं चिकित्सेवागतायुषि प्रसाद्या जगद आत्मानं तपसा दुष्प्रसादनं भवचितम् अयाचेहं भवं भाग्या विवर्जितः. Translation. Do I do word to word? No.
No.
Translation. It is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in my case, although I have satisfied the super soul of the whole universe, I have prayed only for useless things. My activities were exactly like treatment given to a person who is already dead. Just see how unfortunate I am. For in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord, who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes it so happens that a devotee engaged in the loving service of the Lord desires some material benefit in exchange for his service. This is not the proper way to discharge devotional service. Out of ignorance, of course, sometimes a devotee does so. But Dhruva Maharaj regrets his personal behavior in this connection. Next verse.
Unless you have a comment.
Srila Prabhupada quite often quotes the verse Kachan Vichinvan Apidevya Ratnam Swamin Kritarthosmi Varam Nayache, that I was after pieces of broken glasses, and but I got a very precious gem. I am now fully satisfied. So although our desires may be misplaced, however, if somehow or the other we become connected with Krishna, then he purifies those desires at the end. And of course, the regret remains, and that regret is purifying. Text 35. Swarajyam yachato maudhyan mano me bhikshito bata Ishvarat shine punyena palikara nivadhanaha. Translation. Because of my state of complete foolishness and paucity of pious activities, although the Lord offered me his personal service, I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity. My case is just like that of the poor man who, when he satisfied a great emperor who wanted to give him anything he might ask, out of ignorance, asked only a few broken grains of husked rice. Purport. In this verse, the word Swarajyam, which means complete independence, is very significant. A conditioned soul does not know what complete independence is. Complete independence means situation in one's own constitutional position. The real independence of the living entity, who is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is to remain always dependent on the Supreme Lord. Just like a child who plays in complete independence, guided by his parents, who watch over him. The independence of the conditioned soul does not mean to fight with the obstacles offered by Maya, but to surrender to Krishna. In the material world, everyone is trying to become completely independent simply by fighting against the obstacles offered by Maya. This is called struggle for existence. Real independence is to be reinstated in the service of the Lord. Anyone who goes to the Vaikuntha planets or Golok Vrindavan planet is freely offered his service to the Lord. That is complete independence. Just contrary to this is material overlordship, which we wrongly take to be independence. Many great political leaders have tried to establish independence, but due to such so-called independence, the people's dependence has only increased. The living entity cannot be happy trying to be independent in the material world. One has to surrender, therefore, onto the lotus feet of the Lord. Therefore, onto the lotus feet of the Lord and engage in his original eternal service. Dhruva Maharaj regrets that he wanted material opulence and greater prosperity than that of his great-grandfather, Lord Brahma. This begging from the Lord was like a poor man's asking a great emperor for a few grains of broken rice. The conclusion is that anyone who is engaged in the loving service of the Lord should never ask for material prosperity from the Lord. The awarding of material prosperity simply depends on the stringent rules and regulations of the external energy. Pure devotees ask the Lord only for the privilege of serving him. This is our real independence. If we want anything else, it is a sign of our misfortune. So it seems very clear that as soon as a living entity desires to lord over the material nature, Krishna gives him a feeling of independence that he can do it, like Dhruva Maharaj thought he could do it. However, with that feeling of independence, immediate bondage is there due to the illusory energy of the Lord. So we may think that devotional service is binding and it means losing our freedom. But Prabhupada very nicely translates in Bhagavad Gita, Atma Vashay Vidheya Atma. Actually, devotional service means regulative principles of freedom. That actually frees us from the bondage of our desires. Otherwise, we become victim of our desires. So the true independence is simply having this desire to serve the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada many times has mentioned that simply by genuinely desiring to serve the Lord, we can become eligible to serve the Lord and truly become independent by depending on the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Can I share something more?
Yes, please.
Also, I heard Prabhupada mentioning that true independence means dependence on Guru, means dependence on Krishna, means dependence on devotees, dependence on the devotional service process. So when we depend on these personalities and the process of bhakti, then we automatically become completely independent.
That Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comment goes to that point. He gives Krishna he who's glorious in himself with bhakti, or he who possesses his own king. In other words, who's a servant. The Swarajam, he has his own king. So it's what is that? Sanata Jivitam. Kulashekar Maharaj prays. I'll be very happy when I have my master, when I'm engaged in the service, and what is that? Prashanta Nishesha Manoratantra, when I can get free from this business of mental speculation, when I can get off the chariot that's running at the speed of the mind, then I'll be happy. Prashantam Nishesha Manoratantra. Kadaham Aikantaka Nitvakinkara. So this is real independence, as you both pointed out. Let's see if there's anything else I want to mention. And the example is very nice. I went to the Lord to ask for some stupid kingdom, like going to a great emperor and asking for a few broken grains of rice. And therefore he says, Kshina punyena, that it means that I must have been lacking in pious credit because of my foolishness and paucity of pious activities. Prabhupada someplace points that out as the reason people don't engage in service: stubborn obstinacy and lack of pious credit. So here, Dhruva Maharaj, now he's not blaming the demigods, he's blaming himself. And I'm just a fool. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. There was one thing that occurred to me towards the end of the purport. Srila Prabhupada says that the awarding of material prosperity simply depends on the stringent rules and regulations of the external energy. So that if somebody's praying for something that is material, some benediction or other, whatever it might be, they may not be thinking it through and understanding that if you get that benediction, so many other conditions are going to come upon you so that that benediction can come your way. You have to take birth. You don't know what's going to happen in that birth. All kinds of other circumstances might come down on you, but you want that one thing. So all these material conditions have to be just so for you to receive that benediction, whereas spiritual benedictions, when you receive them, they're completely free from all these other stringent rules. You can simply be happy. Someone else there, Maharaj, like to read? Oh, wait, we have a hand up first. Let's see. Saraswati Mata, go ahead, please.
It says that we're not meant to fight with the obstacles offered by Maya, but as soon as you decide to become a devotee, you're declaring war on Maya. So in one way, you are sort of trying to overcome the obstacles, and it's not that you're just going to be someone that's passive. You have to be actively trying to overcome all these traps that Maya is giving you. And I'm thinking specifically how we're so attracted to wanting profit, adoration, and distinction. And I'm trying to understand why it is that we want that so much. Hare Krishna.
It's indicated in these verses because of mental concoction. What is that? Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parta manogata. What's the symptom of a self-realized person? How does he speak? How does he walk? Krishna immediately answers, he gives up material desires, which are manogatan, which are just mental concoctions. Elsewhere, the same thing is said. Don't remember the verse. Yeah, anyway, manogatan. These are mental concoctions. There's nothing to it, but the mind is busy under the sway of the material energy. It's busy imagining. That's in the previous verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he imagined that the demigods polluted his consciousness. But everything is imagined. Imagining that my brother is my enemy, imagining that I'll be happy if I get a kingdom, imagining this, imagining that, the whole thing. Therefore, it said prasupta, as if dreaming. What's dream? A dream, but an imagination. And we're imagining imagining that I'm gorgeous, imagining that I'm rich, imagining that I'm a fool, imagining that I'm a great intellectual. That's all mental concoction. Yes. Hare Krishna. .
I'm not seeing anything yet in the chat window, so we can move forward, Maharaj, if there's someone else there who'd like to read.
Yes.
Maitreya Uvacha Mukundasya Padaravindayo Rajo Dusatata Bhava Dishajana Vanchanti Tadasham Vitetam Atmano Yadrichaya Labdamana Samriddhaya. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidur, persons like you who are pure devotees of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can offer liberation, and who are always attached to the honey of his lotus feet, are always satisfied in serving at the lotus feet of the Lord. In any condition of life, such persons remain satisfied, and thus they never ask the Lord for material prosperity. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that He is the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor of everything and anything within this creation, and the supreme friend of everyone. When one knows these things perfectly, he is always satisfied. The pure devotee never hankers after any kind of material prosperity. The karmis, jnanis, and yogis, however, endeavor always for their own personal happiness. Karmis work day and night to improve their economic condition. Jnanis undergo severe austerities in order to get liberation, and yogis also undergo severe austerities by practicing the yoga system for attainment of wonderful mystic powers. A devotee, however, is not interested in such activities. He does not want mystic powers or liberation or material prosperity. He is satisfied in any condition of life as long as he is constantly engaged in the service of the Lord. The Lord's feet are compared to the lotus, wherein there is saffron dust. A devotee is always engaged in drinking the honey from the lotus feet of the Lord. Unless one is freed from all material desires, he cannot actually taste the honey from the Lord's lotus feet. One has to discharge his devotional duties without being disturbed by the coming and going of material circumstances. This desirelessness for material prosperity is called nishkama. One should not mistakenly think that nishkama means giving up all desires. That is impossible. A living entity is eternally existent and he cannot give up desires. A living entity must have desires. That is the symptom of life. When there is a recommendation to become desireless, it is to be understood that this means that we should not desire anything for our sense gratification. For a devotee, this state of mind, nishpriha, is the right position. Actually, every one of us already has an arrangement for our standard of material comforts. A devotee should always remain satisfied with the standard of comforts offered by the Lord, as stated in the Ishopanishad, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitaha. This saves time for executing Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
I remember before Maharaj came to Brisbane, we were trying to promote his visit by broadcasting some of his short video clips. And in one of them, Maharaj was preaching in college, and then Maharaj went to Prabhupada. Said, Maharaj, it's very difficult for us to ask these young boys and girls to give up sense gratification. And Prabhupada said, we are not telling them to give up sense gratification. We are just telling them to regulate sense gratification. So here, I think same thing is mentioned, that yes, we cannot become desireless, but as Prabhupada says, if you can dovetail these desires in Krishna service, we can become really happy. Very beautiful words, actually, Maharaj.
Mm. And it's in contrast, Maitreya says to Vidura that Dhruva Maharaj was asking for something, but devotees like you never ask for anything. So, in that sense, okay, in that sense, Vidura's praised him in an even higher position. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Any other comments or questions on this verse before we move forward? I think we have time to read one more. It's not such a long purport. I saw someone else there who hasn't read yet. Would they like to read the next verse?
37.
Akartyatmajam ayantam samparitya yatha gatam Rajana shadade bhadram abhadrasya kuto mama. Translation. When King Uttanapad heard that his son Dhruva was coming back home, as if coming back to life after death, he could not put his faith in this message, for he was doubtful of how it could happen. He considered himself the most wretched, and therefore he thought that it was not possible for him to attain such good fortune. Purport. Dhruva Maharaj, a 5-year-old boy, went to the forest for penance and austerity, and the king could not at all believe that a small boy of such a tender age could live in the forest. He was certain that Dhruva was dead. He therefore could not fix his faith in the message that Dhruva Maharaj was coming back home again. For him, this message said that a dead man was coming back home, and so he could not believe it. After Dhruva Maharaj's departure from home, King Uttanapad thought that he was the cause of Dhruva's leaving, and thus he considered himself the most wretched. Therefore, even though it was possible that he lost Therefore, even though it was possible that his lost son was coming back from the kingdom of death, he thought that since he was most sinful, it was not possible for him to be so fortunate as to get back his lost son. I don't have any comments on this.
I also don't have a comment, so there you are.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for reading. We may have time to read another verse. Or two. There's some narrative coming up. Ross Prabhu, would you like to read?
Yes, Prabhu. 38.
Yes, sir.
Daya Bhakyam Devarshir Varsha Vigena Trashita Harta Hartur Ati Prito Aram Pradam Mahadanam. Translation. Although he could not believe the words of the messenger, he had full faith in the word of the great sage Narada. Thus he was greatly overwhelmed by the news, and he immediately offered the messenger a highly valuable necklace in great satisfaction. Text 39 to 40. Sad ashram atam aruya pratarshvara parikshutam ramane kulat vidaischa haryasto matya bandubi sankhya dundubi nadena brahma goshena vanubi Nishchakrama Paraturnam Atma Chapi Sano Sukha. Translation. The king Uttanapad, being very eager to see the face of his lost son, mounted a chariot drawn by excellent horses and bedecked with golden filigree. taking with him many learned brahmanas, all the elderly personalities of his family, his officers, his ministers, and his immediate friends. He immediately left the city. As he proceeded in this parade, there were auspicious sounds of conch shells, kettle drums, flutes, and the chanting of Vedic mantras to indicate all good fortune.
One more, and we've got a purport if you'd like to continue.
Suniti Surichis Chasya Mesyo Upma Busite Aruya Sivikam Sardam Utamena Vija Matu. Translation. Both the queens of King Uttanapad, namely Suniti and Suruchi, along with his other son, Uttama, appeared in the procession. The queens were seated on a palanquin. Purport. After the departure of Dhruva Maharaj from the palace, the king was very afflicted, but by the kind words of Saint Narada, he was partially satisfied. He could understand the great fortune of his wife, Suniti, and the great misfortune of Queen Suruchi, for these facts were certainly very open in the palace. But still, when the news reached the palace that Dhruva Maharaj was returning, his mother, Suniti, out of her great compassion, and due to being the mother of a great Vaishnava, did not hesitate to take the other wife, Suruchi, and her son Uttama on the same palanquin. That was the greatness of Queen Suniti, the mother of the great Vaishnava Dhruva Maharaj.
Thank you for reading, Prabhu. Maharaj, would you care to say anything?
This is Vedic culture, to be free from envy. Nirmatsuro pujito. Yes, be broad-minded, to be generous, not to hold grudges, but to desire the welfare of everyone, to be kind in that way. These are the qualities of the Vaishnava, not vindictive, keen to get even, keen to see others suffer. If I had to suffer, they should suffer. These are all signs of a less cultured or less developed person, but a person who's actually advanced in Krishna consciousness becomes equipoised. And then we can see that, the mind becomes equipoised. That's all. Hare Krishna.
Saraswati Mata, please go ahead.
Maharaj, sometimes there's an argument that when we are broad-minded and we sort of try to give people multiple opportunities and chances to sort of correct the wrong that they may be doing, the argument is that you're sort of enabling them, you're giving them free passes and you're sort of enabling their bad behavior. So I'd love to hear what your reply would be to that. Hare Krishna.
Well, in part, it depends on who's who. If you're the king, then you may be in charge of exacting strong justice, but it's not that everybody has to be in that same mood. And even the king can sometimes be merciful. That may be there. But yes, both sides are there. There's Brahminical mentality and a Kshatriya mentality. Kshatriya has to think strongly that no one can get away with anything here. But a Brahmin will be soft-hearted, compassionate, will empathize with others. So it's not wrong for the Brahmin. Even we read in the first canto about Draupadi. Release him, he's the son of a Brahmin, he's the son of our teacher. Why should his parents lament like me? Very soft-hearted, because she's a woman. For a woman to be soft-hearted is a good quality. you don't want a woman who's like a, what's the word? You know, a tank commander. You know, women, you know, hard as nails. Women are supposed to be, as a rule, soft-hearted, sympathetic, and so on. But it's not that the king should also be. If like Draupadi, she's praised for what probably calls her womanly qualities, but you wouldn't praise Arjun for having womanly qualities. Arjun should be hard. As a Kshatriya, he's ready to kill Parantapa, destroyer of the enemies. Draupadi is never addressed as destroyer of the enemies, although in her own way she was. So what makes for good qualities in one person, to be submissive and service-minded. For Shudra is very good, to want to have a master and be engaged in his service. But for a Brahmin, no, he's not looking for someone to maintain him. He wants to keep his independence by just depending on Krishna. So what's good for one person is not necessarily good for another. What's saintly for one person may not be good across the board. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai. Maharaj, would the devotees with you like to lead us in kirtan?
Kirtan? Yes, till. We're getting it together.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paripurajak Sharja Stotra Satashri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath. Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Rupi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you so much, Maharaj, and thank you to your on-site Kirtan band, and thank you everyone for being here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.